Mahek Soni. Welcome to Orchard Park Secondary School, home to FRC Team 2026. If you have any questions throughout this day, please feel free to ask me. I would like to introduce our next speakers, Rishi and Shahroze from Team 1241, presenting on Mastering Drive Coaching in FRC. Thank you.
So yeah, we're just gonna go through some things that we think are important. Not only as a drive coach, but like setting up a drive team for a season and state strategy and avoiding pitfalls. So to start off, let's see if I get this. Cool. Some intros. So we try to find the oldest pictures of us from our lives as we could. So my name is Rishi. I've been a mentor in FRC since 2013. I've been an alum since 2012. Coached teams like 4252, my original alum team, 3683, Team Dave, 1310, and I put 1241 there because I'm going to be doing that this year, so it's pretty exciting. Mainly doing strategy, scouting, and design, and yeah, I've had about 400 match coaches. 400 match coaches.
Hi, my name's Shahroze. That's my actual name for anyone that doesn't know about that. I have been part of FRC since 2013. I was a student. Been mentoring since 2015, and I coached 49-39 for an event. I coached 41 from those 2018, 19, and 22, and then I was doing 12-85 for the past couple of years. Moving forward, I will not be coaching. I think it's not a problem. It's not. But yeah, I'm part of the design mechanical strategy team on 441, and I coached about 480 matches before I counted.
So yeah, just basics. What is your job as a coach? So essentially, the obvious one is to be a drag team leader. You're responsible for everything to do with the drag team when it comes to prepping before an event, to how the event goes, how your drag team handles certain decisions, making sure they're prepped for the match, making sure that they're actually present early enough, and yeah, everything around that. And of course, also making macro calls during the event. I'll go into that a little bit more, as well as like starting and ending. You're also the team representative, so I'm sure a lot of you know, if you do know a team member from another team, chances are it's like a drive coach or someone on the drive team, because based on the strategy and just seeing faces, you kind of see those people more often than not. So as the drive coach, you're kind of seen as the face of the team to some extent. So it's very important that you represent what your team culture is, and basically be kind to others and not get too wrapped up in some of the competition stuff. And yeah, your job is kind of to prepare your alliance for what they may encounter in the match. And then you're the center of communication. So we're going to talk a little bit about like how we structure our communication pipeline and things that we've learned from it. But one thing that is important as a drive coach is you are basically the middle person between your internal team and the external, like the outer like alliance, as well as like other teams that you face against. So it's very important to be a part of those conversations and participate in post-match reviews. Yeah.
All right. So the next point we're going to talk about is event preparation. You do event preparation for pitch scouting strategy. There's also a coaching component to it, even before practice, because it's specifically for the event. So the first thing is driver. The driver is simply the one that's driving around the field. Also, kind of how modern FRC has transformed. They are also doing the game piece manipulation sometimes. So as a driver, something we've always instructed them is focus on the next 2 seconds. You don't need to be worrying necessarily about what's going to happen down the line in the match. Like, what you need to be focused on is, I have this task right now. I need to do that. And then they are getting instructed by, let's say, the operator, the coach, whoever it is. The next part of the drive team is the operator. Two different names that everyone uses. So the reason it has an asterisk is, again, modern FRC has changed quite a bit due to the automation in the robots that we have. So before, and still a lot of teams, including us from last year, is that they control other functions of the robot that isn't the drive base. So endgame, intakes, shooter, stuff like that. But that is shared between the operator and the driver. Now, what we're finding is, which is a lot more important, is that having them be a strategy-minded person, because they're going to be the second coach for the driver. So the reason I say that is, and we'll get into that in a minute, is there are going to be times as a coach you have to step away from your lines, and there has to be someone giving those instructions to the driver as well, outside of the micro calls that the driver has to think of. The last one is human player. They are typically you want your human player to be the leader for the other human players as well. So, for example, from the 2024 game, having your HP be on the other side of the field with no communication with the driver, operator, or coach, you want to make sure that they're able to handle themselves behind the feeders. So, strong communication is extremely important, and making sure that they're actually able to communicate what they're trying to do in the match, because there's going to be times where you have human players that aren't as experienced, not as practiced, things like that. But doing that in a way where you're also sensitive to the other person is important. You can't just force your way as a human player.
Yeah, so a couple of things I wanted to add to this. First off, if you have any questions here, feel free to raise your hand up. We're going to be kind of veering off the slides quite a bit, just to like talk about our experiences and tell some stories of things that we've been through. One of the things I wanted to add to this actually was these are kind of like baseline things that we think are important for these roles. And so when you're as a drive coach, you're probably very involved in picking the roles for the if you are a mentor. And so this is probably a good guideline to do. But as Shazzy did mention, they do change quite a bit from game to game. I've had years where the operator didn't have a controller at all. Sometimes it worked out, sometimes it was a really bad idea. And then other years where the operator is like very in charge of doing like control stuff and there's not as much communication. Think 2015. You didn't have to actually like play against somebody as much. It was more just like people it was faster for children. So that can change from time to time. It's just general stuff. One thing that I do for kind of picking these roles or help pick these roles, as much as like driving ability is important, and we do driver tryouts, it's kind of just seeing if there's like a baseline awareness of like how you can control a robot and see if they have like the like bare minimum to be able to learn from. But it's more about like how involved they are in the team. I think that's like the most important thing. How much they're willing to practice, how much they understand FRC, how to play the game. The operator is like very strategic. I basically do a thing every year where I pick a game for the past. I pick a match, and I go through it one by one, and I'll pause the match in the middle and be like, okay, you're the robot. What should you do next? What path should you take to go back to the feeder station? If there are two notes available, which one should you take? And then have them explain why. And kind of get their understanding, because as an operator, I think it's very important to be that person telling the driver like what they should be doing next and having that like quick decision making. What's up?
Do you have your operator call out the path that you want the driver to take, or is that something that they're making a decision on the fly?
We do. It's a very like quick decision. So the operator is very much the person. We go a little more detail later on how that exactly works. But yeah, the operator is the one deciding on what path to take most of the time. If it is, the coach tends to be the person that's going to change that if something does change the match or the situation, changes that they need to do something a little bit different. But yeah, we use the operator for the most part. I don't remember the last one. Yeah, I think every match, every time I've coached, it's been operator.
Yeah, we typically, for myself, have been, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes as well, is that we practice out the routine paths and things like that. But if there's something different that's happening in a match, then it becomes operator coach's job to let them know, hey, this is happening. And then the driver automatically knows for practice, this is where we need to veer off.
In terms of picking your drive team, how much do you consider their attendance and if they were on the team previously?
That is a huge part of it. So one of the things we look out for in the off season is kind of the effort that they're putting in, how they are as a team member, and if they're a leader. That's one of the most important things to us. We do driver tryouts, but if it's between two people where one person has been showing up significantly more, they've been putting in a lot more effort, 100% important. We take the actual time during driver tryouts with a grain of salt. We just use that as a reference if there's a diamond in the rough or anything like that. But attendance, effort, how they work on the team, and leadership, those are the most important things, because your driver is also going to be the face of your team.
So that actually transitions great into the next one, because it's very important to think people are very involved, because the most important thing we think is practice, practice, practice. So for this, we're going to go through a couple of slides. We've dedicated quite a bit to understanding how you do practice and why it's so important. And to start off, start simple. So essentially, the first thing the kid has to learn is how to drive the robot, how to take certain turns, how to like move around structures. Very very simple stuff. It's critical to do it right in the beginning. You shouldn't need, and it kind of works with the build season because you're probably finishing your drive train first anyway, so you can get that one full right away and getting the driver used to it. We have some videos here actually to show it off.
So the first video will be kind of when we did the first type of practice. So for us on 44145, what we've typically done is we'll take a week or two to train the driver just how to drive. No game piece manipulation, none of that. Understanding the mechanics of the robot. So you can see in that first video, like that was our driver that we picked. That was about the first or second day where we're keeping it really close, tight quarters with the wall, putting coats down, and then forcing them to go around the obstacles. And we did that type of stuff for a whole week before they even touched the gates.
And they're gonna be like that look pretty rough. It's gonna look like that in the beginning, and I think that's totally fine. That shouldn't really discourage you because it does. I think like being in like a swerve era now, I feel like it's a lot easier to get used to this stuff than it was in the past. It's a lot less punishing when you make a wrong turn or something. You can like get punished if you like complete jolts in different directions, and we'll have some examples to kind of show what that looks like. But yeah, it's just a part of the process. I think pretty many players work after a long time. So,
when in the season have you chosen your drivers and operators?
So we chose. It's been different times. There's ideal. So last year we chose drivers like in Feb, I think it was. That was definitely the least ideal possible. We kind of had 1241's driver continue on, so that was a little easier. But the 1245 one we had to be fresh. This year we did driver tryouts 2 days ago. So we started fresh. The off seasons are kind of a way to get an idea of like if they're into it. But again, the main thing is definitely season involvement. So we basically say like you get the off season, nothing else is promised. After that, we have to stay involved.
So for drivers tryouts, I know you said or you talked about like being for the driver, and it's a lot easier to teach the student to drive a robot than to teach them like values of a good driver, so like resilience and like being calm and collected. So how do you gauge that from students? Do you look at like their extracurriculars, so whether they're on a sports team or not, or like their grades and attendance? I know you said like attendance in terms of the team, but what other like mechanisms I guess you use to gauge like the stuff that you can't really teach?
Yes. So for 1285 last year, there were two students, being completely transparent, there were two students that ended up being the obvious decisions during the tryouts. It was between them two. The student that was the favorite to get driver actually didn't end up being the driver. It was the other person. So there was a few factors about that. We knew both of them were committed. We knew both of them were good. The difference was one driver, he seemed like he was a little too cautious with his movements. And we've always said keep it slow, things like that. He was too cautious. The other one was too aggressive. We looked at both of them, and the thing that we were okay with going in. The reason being is because both of them had committed a bunch of time during the off season. Both of them had showed leadership skills, so that's a more thing for us. The way we do that is we work a lot with them during the off season. And then since we did 1285 driver tryouts in February last year, we'd already built the robot by then. Personally. So for us, it was that we saw how they had progressed throughout that whole time. And there were some students that actually had a slightly better time, but we didn't progress them forward in the driver trials because they hadn't put in the same type of commitment that the other students had. We also asked for the students, we're very upfront for the student time commitment for being drivers. We understand that it's a very time-intensive activity for them, so we let them know like, hey, this is the amount of time you have to put in for the next 4 months, basically.
I would say that I'll just add to the driver that we had control for this year was a lot different of the demeanor, of the style, of like how she wanted to learn than what I've had in the past. Like I've had drivers in the past that like one of the styles that we were going to talk about a little bit more is just like refinement and doing it again and again and again, like running the robot into the wall again and again. And some drivers have learned really well from that, while you give them like little tidbits on like how to improve. I'll save that for some of the things. But then I've had drivers. I had a driver this year that was wanted to talk things out a little bit more, maybe understand like exactly what they were doing wrong. They didn't see it as obvious when they watched it, but once we explained it out, once we talked it out, they made like big improvements like in a little amount of time. Doing the whole like running into the wall again and again and again wasn't as thing because they started to kind of build up their doubts and they didn't really understand what they were doing. So it will change. There's not really I would say there's not really like a demeanor that is like specific to a driver, but it can change. It's the commitment I think at this point. And you can like make a lot of it.
Gone through, I think there are 4 drivers, and all 4 of them were incredibly different. But the big thing that they all had the same was the effort that they were willing to put in and the how they worked. That's really the first one. Sometimes it depends on the game. So, for example, this year for Solo 5, the driver was in charge of driving, and then the shooter. And we had the intake button on his controller, but then he said he couldn't move the joystick properly while holding the intake button, so we moved that to the operator. Sorry. Oh yeah, they're usually like one of the sub team leads. That's typically how it's ended up working out.
I would say it's not a requirement. It's never really. I've had like an operator in the past that was just one coach, and her skills like as a coach kind of showed that she's like the process. So it definitely helped. That's something that we asked the question like how it's forced could be. The only requirement I would say is that they're available to practice and that they travel to the US. Because that was I had a driver one year that gave them the role. And then we found out that they were a refugee and they don't have a passport. So we had a whole process, and we got the passport for them like the day before Worlds, or I'm sorry, the day into Worlds.
So then the second video is about a week after we practice doing the different routines. You can see the driver got much more used to like actually clearing the robot around the different coats in really tight quarters. Coming back, we tried working on our pads, keeping it tight to the trusses, things like that. So you see the big difference from the first video to the second video, and that was just a week of purely driving. The shooter wasn't working until basically that video. So the shooter practice really wasn't there. It was just about drive to this location, drive to this location, get around these things.
How many hours
More than we should, but it was like actually that's not true. But so that these videos are not taken at our school. We traveled to a field. We're in Mississauga. We traveled to Alpha Dogs Field in Bolton. It's about a 30-minute drive, so it's not really reasonable to do on weekdays. We have a little bit of a space in our school, a lot of little bigger this year, so we'll probably do a lot there. But for the most part, it's committing a lot of weekends. I would say a lot of Friday evenings doing it. We run till I think the latest we're allowed to go or we go is 11.
Yeah, so
it goes pretty late sometimes.
It'll end up being on the weekends if the driver is available. So they commit at least a day. We typically go around 12 hours. Out of that, the robot's broken for half the time. So
which is why you should practice a lot because you'll find all the things that you'll break. That's like a side thing, not really related to coaching, but you're definitely gonna find stuff. I did include. I have a picture of in 1241's robot of the note stuck in between the shooter and the climber. And it happened maybe like 15 times during practice and never out of the event. Like we figured out everything. Cool.
all right, next thing we're going to talk about is designing a baseline strategy with your drive team as a coach. So what does that mean, right? Everyone knows that you do strategy in a match. We're figuring out with your alliance partners, and then you go and actually perform that strategy. The big difference is you have these baseline strategies that inform your in-match strategies around. So what that means is around kickoff, you'll do a strategic breakdown of, this is the type of role we want to play this year. Do we want to be, I'm going to use 144 a lot since it's the most recent game. Do Do we want to be an amp only robot? Do we want to be a speaker robot? Do we want to do both? Do we want to hang? Do we want to craft? We have all these things. Okay, now do we want to play the feeder role? So do we want to be great at shooting notes over because we realize that's going to be an important part of the game, or do we want to be that robot that sits on the fender and then moves on? So for us, you got to figure out those strategies and then revolve around that. What that means is now, for example, let's say you want to be able to feed yourself 2 notes so that by the time you're amped, you score 1 and then you have 2 more in front of you. You have to practice that out. You have to practice the different paths. You have to practice that baseline strategy. But you also have to actually practice the feeding. So then maybe you spend a whole day of practice only doing feeding. Spend a whole day of practice only doing cleanup at the what's that called? The subwoofer. That's it. I've never gotten that right. At the subwoofer. So yeah, having those baseline strategies of we're gonna full field cycle this match, practice that out. We're going to be the stealing robot. We're gonna go to the opponents. We're gonna steal, come back, get it. Practice that out. We're gonna just beat this match. Practice that out as well. We're gonna play defense. Go to your local team's field where they're practicing, and teams will appreciate it. Where if you ask them, hey, can we play a little bit of defense on you, get some defense practice? Go play defense on them because then that's practice for them how to play against defense. The key thing is by having these different strategies in place, if things change in a match, you have your contingency plans already practiced out. You should never, as a coach, you should be training your drive team where when you're going into a match, regardless of what's happening, they always have another strategy that they can shift to. They always have another baseline that they can shift to. Also, boring is clutch. What does that mean? Basically what that means is if you do the same thing over and over again and you're really good at it, and you can execute it every single match, perfect. Yeah.
I've had a lot of times where we're doing practice and mentors students get like antsy because they want to do something different. They want to like change it up a little bit, but I think it's just more boring.
The consistency is key. It's not the doing the fancy stuff.
Do you ever find that over practicing certain routes or like drills gets makes drivers less good at figuring out they fall out of it? Like, yeah, this is a lot of now. Like, I don't know ones that will practice before you get the worse.
That's a really good point because as a coach, what you should be doing is when you're training these things, the way we like to progress it is you teach the driver to trade, and then you do these like repetitive practices. Then you start doing full match practices so that they get used to doing it within a time frame. After that, you want to throw different things at them that make them switch up their decision. So what we'll do is we'll start the drivers during practice in the left driver station, make them take certain routes, different routes, things like that. Move them to the middle, move them to the right driver station. Sight lines is a huge thing. So what you want to be doing is even when stuff goes wrong, they know what the next step is. They don't have to think about what the next step is. They're just doing the next step. That's a really good point because we're going to get into it as well.
Yeah. So just there's
What is the role of the drive coach when you're doing practice?
When you're doing practice, typically when that actual practice is going on, initially you want to be a bit more what works for us is we want to be a bit more verbal. So it's like, when they're going around this host, stay perpendicular to the toad as you're passing by it. That way your robot brain is a little bit smaller versus you're coming in at a dime. So constantly saying those things. At a certain point, you want to be able to let them go through the motions of doing like, let's say 10 cycles, stop, and then after that, review it with them. Take videos, take times down, and we're going to talk about that actually. That's a really good point. We'll get into that in a minute as well.
So preface, this is a practice video of 1690. They posted this on GW after it went rogue, right? Yeah. It was one of the practice drafts that they showed off.
So 1690 is notorious for how much they practice. This is a video of them doing stealing practice. So you can see that they go in against the defender, grab their notes without getting any penalties, get out, and then do their next motion. So they know they're going to do amp, speaker, amp, speaker, speaker is stealing from the other one. That's how they got so good at stealing. And there's a Chief Delphi post of them doing this exact same thing with feeding, doing the exact same thing with speaker shots, cleanup, and the exact same thing just constantly happening. So then the next video.
So actually, someone mentioned about like getting in a routine. A lot of the things I think is just like planning out your practice and like what you want to hit like week to week to kind of understand like you should be able to basically figure out like what 90% of the situations are. And so like putting them in situations like that will help them kind of deal with adaptability. It's like big adaptability, but the different situations will kind of skew more stuff.
It's kind of like you get tested in school, right? You can only do so much homework, you can only practice so much. And then when you get to the test, the question is completely new. But because you've set that foundation, you can answer those questions without even having to think about it. You just start going through it. So that practice that you just saw, this is a match from Einstein, where you see it directly correlate to their on-field performance.
So I think they are top right? They're like somewhere over here.
So you'll see them go over to the blue lines and steal a note. Go put it up into the speaker. And then this is the point where you see where it's like they've gotten used to getting around a defender. They didn't even think about, driving straight out or driving into the defender. They went left immediately as soon as they pick up the note because they're so used to that type of practice.
And like they do little things that are cool, which is like while they have a whole lane to get from one side of the field to the other. So as you're moving, they do strafe a little left and right to kind of fake out a little bit. Those are things that don't really like. We can talk about now because we're seeing it, but I think as you do practice, you start to realize with some of these things, the driver's just trying to figure out how to get around the defender, and so those will come just with time and practice.
It's a coach's job during practice to point out these things to the driver that they might not be noticing. And then that way the driver can actually notice it. Because when a driver's locked in a match, for whoever's driven over here, a lot of drivers don't even remember what happened during the match. It's like you have to review the game video with them, you have to review these things with them. And as a coach during practice, it's your job to level.
You're gonna forget as well. I think for like my whole first year, I just didn't remember what happened in the match, and we got to go into the game. Start like thinking for subject zero content. Yeah, it's the video will be important.
The next point, which we've pretty much been talking about, so I'll keep this one short. We love talking, by the way.
Yeah, I love that.
Build routines and shortcuts. So what that means is we're just talking about have these baseline strategies, have these contingency plans that you've already practiced out so that if a situation arises, you can do that. So for us, we found what works is first of all, create these routines that you typically run, and then actually assign names to them with variables in the names that you can switch up. So something we did this year for 2024 was, let's say, before a match starts, the operator, human player, and the driver, they ask, okay, what are we doing this time? I could tell them, yeah, we're gonna feed 2, then after that, we're gonna put 1 into the amp, then we're gonna put 1 into the speaker. After that, we're gonna do 1 into the amp, and then 1 into the speaker, and then after that, we're gonna feed 2, but then this time we're not doing the amp, we're going to the speaker. That's tough. That's tough to remember, especially when you're in game, right? So what we did was, this year, we did basically numbers to indicate the type of score that they're doing. And then at the end, we put whatever finishes off that cycle. So for example, 3 plus 1 amp. What that means is we're going to feed 3. We're going to take 1 from the human station, full field cycle, and then put it into the amp. 2 plus 1 cleanup. What that means is we're going to feed 2. We're going to grab 1, go straight to the speaker, shoot, and then whatever notes are there, we're going to clean up those notes. Then it gets a little bit more complicated where we say 2 plus 1 plus 1 reset. What that means is, okay, we're going to feed 2, we're going to amp a full field cycle amp 1, and then we're going to full field cycle 1 speaker, and then we're going to repeat that again. So what this allowed us to do is now with these numbers, the driver and operator know, okay, I'm going to be doing 2 plus 1 plus 1, then I'm going to be doing 1 plus 1. And that's how we started communicating. And then in a match, if anything changes, I can quickly go to them and tell them, hey, we're switching to 1 plus 1 instead of 2 plus 1. And they don't even have to think about it. Initially, it's going to be tough. Initially, getting the terminology down is going to be tough. but you're prepping them for a match. You're not prepping them just for practice. That's what practice is.
To add to this, this is like you kind of adapt whatever strategy you think will work for your drive team. So, put in perspective, we paired up. Strategy was totally devised coach last year. I was 441 strat. We paired up together at Durham. When we had the strat meeting, he's like, "Okay, so we're going to do a 3+1 here," and I had no idea what he was talking about. I practiced with him for 50 plus hours at this point, but it's because it was like very specific to his drive team, and like it was whatever they made for it. We just had actually, I make him into I think I said it was like PvP and XP. Like I made like a jingle out of it to try to remember it more often. Yeah. I like the dad jokes. Those are my favorite.
Yeah. Also, another thing is when you practice out these routines, you can figure out from your practice how much time this is going to take me. So this is the part where it's important for a coach in game, where if I know that a full field cycle to grab a note and then go to the speaker is going to take me 15 seconds, I look at the clock and I have 12 seconds left in the match. I'm just going to go ahead. There's no point of me trying to do a full field cycle because I know from practice that I can't achieve that. So that helps you make those calls as well because you remember those times in your head. And then you're able to make those calls on the fly. Like you could look at a match, 1 minute left in the match, and as a coach, you can pretty much break it down because you know from practice, this is how long stuff's going to take me. I know I can put up 4 more rows, and that's pretty much it.
How important is practicing these drills with other robots on the team?
Extremely important.
It'll probably happen later in the season or I guess closer to your event. I guess is a better way to say it. But yeah, we definitely. I think most fields that are around Ontario do run like little scrimmages. For Orthodox Field, we ran a 2-day scrimmage and we had like 8 teams show up. Those have been really important in learning about what we actually understand.
Last point is pretty much you want to be able to walk away from your directing. That Rishi's going to go over.
Yeah, my favorite part of my job is when I don't have to do it. So I want to specify first. This is very specific to the operator coach style. If you have a different style, it might not be something that is feasible for your drive team. That's totally fine. You could run 2 human players and a driver. I don't know who would do that, but it was very smart, and that's why it wouldn't be something that they would necessarily do, 2026 would necessarily do. But something that I like to lean on is drive team autonomy. So I try to be as a coach, I try to stay out of the majority of calls. A routine match, a match goes really well if I have to say as minimal words as possible, in my opinion, because that just means that everyone's practiced out, everyone knows the routine, operator knows exactly what to do next. For the most part, I'll throw in stuff every so often, or I'll make sure the alliance is doing well. But for the most part, I want them to run autonomously. Normal gameplay should just garner encouragement. So something that I prefer to do is just if the match is going well, just to add positive reinforcement to it, good job, keep going, just to make sure that just to add something to the conversation and kind of keep them moving. Clean communication. So one of the things that we find in practice is, and Shahroze kind of mentioned this, but yeah, you want to refine exactly the words that are going back and forth. If you leave your driver and operator to run, they'll definitely struggle to communicate at the beginning. You pick words, you pick short phrases, to kind of make it easy to get stuff done. Name different lanes on the field, left lane, right lane, understage, stuff like that. In 2019, there was to explain I give a rough estimate. There's one area where you would pick up game pieces for the most part, and then there's a giant scoring area. And I would tell my driver when he's playing defense, I would just say, don't let him leave. Doesn't matter what direction. Those words put him in a specific position to play defense, and he knew what his goal was. And then I would tell him to switch, and he would switch to a different position. These are just words that we created during practice. And figuring that out in practice is very important because it can save you a lot of time. Figure out who should call what. We found, for example, this year feeding was definitely something that wasn't a priority to practice right in the beginning, but something that we eventually realized was going to be a different thing to communicate because potentially one person is controlling the feed and the other person is controlling the drive. You can obviously not make that the case. But communicating when that should happen was something that we had to figure out in practice. It was really rough at the start, and when the driver expected to let go of cadence, for example. And focus on macro. So test out your calls, test out, obviously being a coach here at practice. It's not something that is, like, it'll be very different, obviously, when you get to competition. Everything's a lot louder, it's a lot harder to hear things, but give it a try, see what works for you. There's no, like, I would say, right way to do it. I've seen teams like 2767, some of the videos that they posted of how their draft team communicates, and they are constantly talking the whole time. If you've ever seen uh, like like pro gaming or something, you hear that they talk a lot, and that's how like, their drag team runs. While last year, I would say my drag team, the operator was really the only one, and the driver just like went through and said things when it was important, but very legal. Yeah, you filled and refined. There it is. Set goals and time cycles. So obviously, once they learn how to drive, once they figure out how standard match will go, you want to start setting goals for like what do they want to accomplish. So how long, how many cycles do they want to accomplish? How fast do they want the cycle to be? Trying to figure out. It's a little game that they can play to try to kind of get good, I guess. But make a reasonable goal to strive for, something to kind of feel like they're progressing in some way. It'll kind of help with the learning and development, help the drive team understand their improvements. So as you're watching, you kind of want to see where they have a little bit of mistakes. The next slide actually shows a real example where 1241 has some issues that we want to fix, and repetition is key. I've included these two pictures because these are the two robots that we think were probably the most successful because of the practice that we had. The first one's 2016 Dave. That robot was, to put in perspective, like it was a game where you could shoot in a high goal and a low goal. The high goals were 5 points, the low goals were 2. We decided to just stay low for that whole season and just go something that was robust and fast. Maybe not fast for this year's standards, but faster than at least. And the driver was half decent, but basically just a lot of practice allowed us to be definitely one of the higher game piece scorers for that season. And I think as a logo block, I think we never ranked lower than third. I think it was like first, third, and second. It was regionals time, so it was like 2 regionals and worlds. So it was definitely one that was accomplishing to the fact that we just practiced a lot. And it was very simple to do. And also only one controller. There was no operator control. Once our robot,
Yeah, 22, our robot was very simple. No bird, no quarter, no reversal hanger from that year. It just literally shot balls and then went up 1 bar. But the thing was, because we did that, even though it was the COVID era, we initially thought the season wasn't going to happen. We started 2 weeks late. We ended up getting that robot done probably the earliest we've ever finished a robot. Like in full presentation. So the fact that we finished that early, we were able to get so much practice out of it, and it never broke during practice, which you guys know 1241 that's a big accomplishment. We break our robots a lot. So because we kept it simple, we started practicing with it right away. We were able to refine it, put more automation into it, and it was successful on the field because of that. And it had absolutely nothing special about it other than the fact that what we were trying to do just worked well.
like to take back, he was a really good driver, not easy to do.
And Annie. Yeah, so kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, reviewing and refining, reviewing film and refining. So record your practice matches, watch them with your driving in, act like you're in an actual match setting, especially when you get to that point of practice where you're treating it like a real match. You're doing the 2-minute and 15-second time matches. Be in the match with your drive team like you're actually focused, like no, like, you know, side comments being put in or anything like that. Like when you're there with your drive team during practice, actually lock in. The time before that is for doing those type of things, but when you're doing the time matches, pretend like you're in a game, because when things go wrong or when things change, your drive team is used to those calls being made. So something that we've done is during a match, during practice matches, we'll spend like a couple days where the drivers only do what the coaches are calling because they're already used to doing the routine stuff. So we'll spend a couple days just going, okay, come back stage left, come back stage right, under stage, speaker, amp, and then purposely, I'll switch it up on them at the very last second to get their transition time down a little bit. So that if it happens in a match, typically when a coach making those calls, it's like very last second, right? If there's something switching up. So your driver has to be ready for that. You can see here, start small and then build up from that. In this video, 441, you can see that there's a lot of waving around, things like that, but that's completely okay. When you're practicing, stuff like this is completely okay. You're not going to get perfect right away. As a coach, it's your job to remind your driver that it's fine. Like, okay, you didn't stay tight to the truss, stop wavering back and forth, come in tighter. Okay, let's stop this type of practice, let's practice just that driving. Things like that is your job as a coach to really implement on your driver.
I'll say our driver did not even realize, and I'll wait till it happens. But essentially, when she goes onto the stage, she like you were mentioning, like waving back and forth. She was kind of changing directions a lot. She was trying to pre-aim for the amp before she got there, like aim, like be ready for it, be in position. But she was losing a lot of speed going under the stage, and so that would be something that I would point out to her that because of the like constant direction switching she's doing, or the fact that she's just not hitting the throttle as much, she is losing some time. But just pointing that out and letting them work it out is not something that you expect to fix right away. Yeah. Cool. I made a little communication pipeline here. Sorry if it's hard to read, but essentially, this is how we do communication on theory. So the strategy is definitely the main person or the main group, I would say, to communicate with other stakeholders. So you have scouting here, communicating scouting data, and the previous match video. We record all our matches so that we can review them. Give it to strategy. Pits is updating strategy on like the state of the robot, so they understand like what works, what doesn't. And then strategy is basically communicating that information to both the coach and other alliance partners. I put here this like you do strategy. You obviously do strategy with your alliance partners. The coach is like kind of optional to be involved or not. I think it depends on the team and how involved the coaches in that side, or if you have somebody that's more dedicated to strat. So that's kind of optional, but for the most part, it's probably good practice to have them just so they can communicate. And I also have coach talking to pits about robot issues, which happens a lot.
With strategy, you drive strategy, really bad.
That's a good question. I did forget to put that. So coach is essentially communicating to drive team for the most part. Strategy as well. It depends on like how your team runs. But we tend to have drive team away from the whole strategy talk until we're ready for the match, and then we give them exactly what they want. So it tends to be strategy or the coach, depending on how it works.
What about in terms of like interacting with people in pits? Like let's say you have like the drive team is suffer like really like crushing their feet, like you send them like into the pits where they like watch like your neighbor's robot do like together, you like sort of like isolate them.
We actually have a slide on that, so I'll hold off on that one. Yeah. It's not called crushing the beat, but yeah, cool. First match coaching.
First match coaching. So this is where you prioritize yourself a little bit as well. Keep your drive team calm, collected. Whatever happens in the match happens. Usually the first match is always a little bit rough for some of us. But yeah, the biggest thing is just keep your drive team comfortable. Like, remember this, right? Especially for the mentors here as a coach. Like, you've been in this program for a while. A lot of mentors are all adults. Mentors are adults. You've kind of figured out how to handle pressure situations, or at least you have more life experience for that, right? For the drive team, this is one of the most stressful and pressure-filled situations that they're going to be a part of so far. So remembering that as a coach going in with these students is keep them calm, collected. Priority first match, just have fun. If things go wrong, we'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. And then for yourself, don't try to, we can talk about running, going to the alliance, working with them, things like that. Just focus on you and your drive team, and then if you need to work with alliance partners, go for it. But for the most part, keep yourself and the drive team comfortable.
Pre-match. So we talked about this a lot, so I'm not going to go too detailed, but yeah, before a match, review your upcoming strategy, reiterate it, watch teams that you're about to play, define important details to watch out for tendencies. So something that is kind of cool is if you do have if you know that you're probably facing a defender, essentially have that video available, show that to the driver, let them understand what they're about to go up against, so they feel a little more prepared, even if they aren't really learning from it. Even just the feeling of being more prepared might help them overall. And yeah, watch report robots in general, if applicable. Review defense to include, how opponent offense will play. Basically said that. But yeah, a lot of pictures of nice.
Next slide that we're going to talk about is in match. First thing, don't get lost in the match. You're not there to be the number one cheerleader. Have the best, front row view of the match. Stay focused on the match. Watch the entire field. If you prep your drive team enough, they can take care of the actions. You don't need to be necessarily watching them. You need to think about the next set that you're going to provide to your drive team if they need it. Happened to me last year. In 2022 it happened where we scored a bunch of goals. Started playing defense because we locked up the opponent. Didn't really need to play defense. Came out of the match, I'm all excited, like, yeah, that was such a good coaching call. My strategist chewed me out because essentially we needed one more ball for our team. And I just got really excited because we were playing defense. I was like, yeah. So don't get lost. Stick to the plan unless you need to change it. Baseline strategy is boring as clutch. Just continue on with that unless things change. And then just be confident. Like, whatever calls you're making, even if they were the wrong one, it's okay. You're going to make the wrong call. That is completely fine. Just whatever call you're making, instill confidence in your drive team, especially in that pressure field situation during the match.
And post-match, so do your debriefs. Make sure your strategy has that video of the match. Review it with your drive team. Make sure they understand what happened. Try to figure out why they did certain things and what they can improve for the next match. Refine that feedback. It's going to happen again and again. They're going to do something, and then 3 matches later, they're going to potentially do the same thing. Make sure to refine, hey, it's still happening. Watch out for this. And yeah, if it's in the limbs, you should be doing this with your alliance as well. Trying to make sure everyone's playing the role that they should. Take a breather. Being on drive team in general, or even strategy is very emotionally involved. You're just on for these 2.5 minutes, and so take a break. Go get some water. Go look at other robots. It's just kind of reset a little bit because it can really help you stay focused when you're actually yeah. And that's a big one. Agree on when you're expected to be back. That's a losing drive team. It's a constant thing. I once missed the match in 2017 because I did. I was, if anything, it was a 12:41 parent that gave me a samosa, and I started talking to her. It's very, yeah.
He was a driver for that match. That guy right there.
Yeah. We won that match, so
we didn't do.
Really.
He traded that well.
Remember, drive team was on.
All right, you win some. So matches that you win, especially during the Olympics, get excited, get happy. Work hard on these robots. Get excited about these things. That's totally okay. And enjoy your time, enjoy the win. But you also have to remember that the job's not done yet. So you still have other matches coming up. Let's say you play finals 1, you're the underdog, you win that match. Obviously, you're going to be excited, right? But the thing to remember is you still have another match coming up. You still need to do the debrief. You still need to do the pit check. You still need to do all of these things. So it's okay, get happy, get excited, but move on from that and then get ready for the next match. Keep your emotions regulated as much as you can after you've had that moment of excitement. Don't let that pour over into the task that you're supposed to be doing, because then if you lose the next 2 matches, then it's just it's a little bit sad. Which segues into Rishi's.
These are just pictures of them winning, no correlation between them, of course. You lose some. So
it's not here, it doesn't work.
So yeah, review your footage. Well, not before the debrief. That's the debrief. When you lose, it can be definitely a time where you feel like you have to make a lot of big changes to keep up. I would say like I think Nathan and Peter talked about this in your talk as well. Like value the changes you make based on like the probability of winning or how close that match is. So the idea is like you want to make a big change. If it really was that big of a blowout, then sure, go for it. But I would try to like get yourself out of how you feel about it. That's way harder said than done. I'm sure I've been very emotional during some of these talks as well. Just like understand that if it was close, that maybe you are on the right track. You just need to make a little bit of change. Losing doesn't it's binary, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to make a big change. Keep an eye on your drive team. Be gentle. So this year specifically, 1241 had a really and 1245 actually had a really rough first day of provincials. And I'm not going to agree with that. We had a really rough day, and a lot of emotions high, and it kind of drags in the drive team losing so much. It was eventually at the point where later in the day, I had to just the debriefing kind of had to stop, kind of telling them exactly what they're messing up again, tell them to take a break, tell them that like we'll handle the rest. They just need to kind of reset emotionally. Give them that space. If they need to talk to somebody, then by all means. But yeah, kind of that hard reset can help a lot. The second day was a lot more successful, I'd say, and it was the exact opposite feeling. So yeah, they last as long as you let it last. And then 5 ways to keep high team morale. So huddle speeches, take a walk, and reinforce confidence to the deepest that you still believe in what you're all can accomplish.
The nice part is it's usually winter here, so taking a walk outside really kind of resets everyone.
These are pictures of both of us moving on Einstein. So
Yeah. So,
worked up.
all right, talking about clutch time. Preparation is key. When we say clutch, what we don't mean is be a hero. As a coach, don't be a hero. Don't try to be a hero. Like if you need to be a hero, you're doing something wrong. Right? So preparation is key. Setting up contingency plans with your strategy team that if this goes wrong, I'm going to be doing this. If this goes wrong, I'm going to be doing this. If this partner breaks, what are the switch arounds going to look like for role? That's your job as coach, keep in mind. But you don't necessarily need to relay all that information to the drive team. The drive team pretty much needs to know what are your partners doing and what they're going to be doing. If stuff changes, you've prepped them enough that you can make that call and they'll make that switch. So this is where everything starts to connect, where preparation leads to in-game. If there's any switching that needs to happen, they're ready for it. But they've already played out whatever that switch is going to be. Kind of falls into practicing the different situations. And then we mentioned this earlier as well, be direct and confident. If you're going to make a call, stick by your call, right? Like if I need to double hang with a partner, the partner that was going to double hang can double hang, and I need the other partner to come with me. Go to the third partner, ask them, are they broken? No, yes, yes, okay. Now I'm going to move on to my drive team. Hey, don't worry, we're in about 20 seconds, we're going to be hanging with this team instead, stay on the left side of the chain. Then go over to the other alliance member, let them know, hey, we need you to hang with us. We're taking left side on the chain, go to the right side. And then start navigating that behind the glass of, okay, right, left. Everybody set up, okay, 3, 2, 1, up. You have to be confident in those calls. You can be like, maybe go to the right, maybe go to the left. If you hear that behind the glass, it's 2 minutes and 15 seconds. That's it, that's a match. Right? So when you're making the clutch calls, typically that's within like 10, 15 seconds. So relatively, that's like almost no time. So just remembering to be confident in your calls.
And like Shahroze mentioned, these mainly happen like when something breaks. That's like usually the majority of these things. So when preparation and in practice, like playing out these situations where something does break is probably a good idea.
Many clutch calls last year.
And probably one of the prime examples, I guess, of breaking and figuring it out was we have an example that we're going to show a video from 2023, the Galileo division at the World Championship. So essentially, this is secret circuits. Essentially, what happened was midway through a match, they noticed that their intake was broken. They attempted to pick up a cube twice, picked up cone once. At that point, they realized they were completely broken. They switched to defense, and the way they switched to defense showed that they kind of understood where they had to play exactly in the field. They understood that they had to focus on one robot at a time because it was potentially the most valuable they could get out of it. They picked on the robot that they thought was the most likely to take, or it might have just been that they were in that area. Either way, it worked out. It was 2005. They ended up breaking, and they ended up switching on to 1114. And at the same time, when this stuff is happening, I'm sure like there's a lot of potential panic going on, or like a lot of, I guess your stress levels are very high, but it's very important that, and what they showed is that they remember that end game is still very important. Make sure to keep watching that timer and go back at the same time as you know where the if not, will.
While Rishi plays the video for this, something that I want to add on is Citrus actually practiced like almost 100 hours of defense practice. So if we break this into small, we're going to be going to play defense. Because especially in 2023, defense was not very effective. It wasn't like this year. So the fact that they knew exactly where to go and the exact type of defense to play and actually be effective was incredible the way they did it. But they knew what to do because they practiced it. It wasn't an in-game thing.
So Citrus is right here on the left side. They're also behind the referee. I think I got the right spot. Essentially, they're going to attempt here to pick up a cube, fail. They already attempted that one. It didn't work. They switched to get a cone on the left side there. They're clearly having trouble picking it up. And just confidently switch. So they start to play this little area here to get in the way of anybody cycling the pieces. They know that there's like a protected area here, so they're trying to kind of siphon a red robot into the blue area, pitch some fouls, and slowly they're going to realize that 3005, I believe, broke a wheel.
There's no way they're doing that unless they practice that. Right? Like, it's just,
they're turning with the other drivetrain to kind of keep it the same level. They realize 3005 is broken, and they switch onto playing a farther area because they know 2005 is going to take up this area. They switch on 114, and they kind of keep them out of their area a little bit. At this time, there's like a lot of feeling. You're like, what should I do next? What should I think? A lot of, I would say, like waiting is very important. Just like don't try to rush into a decision. But yeah, at around like 12 seconds, they switch onto their climb, and they still get that in time.
the crazy part is the whole time you're watching that, who looked frazzled on the field? The team that broke or the team that was getting defended? The team that was getting defended. Because Citrus just practicing so much. Like they practice every single thing. And they practicing defense also gets you really good at practicing around defense as well. So you'll see a lot of the top teams, they're very good at playing defense and getting around defense at the same time.
All right. That is everything that we had. I just wanted to see if there's any questions or anything. Yeah.
For us, we keep it a hard, fast rule that our coaches will only be mentored. Big reason for that is it's already a very stressful situation, and the coach usually ends up taking up front of the stress from different aspects of the team. So that be the fit strategy, just general stuff with our team, plus interacting with other teams. Like, I've had a lot of times where I've had adult mentors come up to me and get extremely mad at me after a match because they went a bad way or we broke or something like that. And I can't imagine my students having to deal with that after coming off of something that was already devastating in that moment. So for us, it's always been about we're going to put a mentor drag coach in as kind of that buffer between the high stress situation.
Can I add something about that? We always say we like to have a mentor drug coach as well. We always say at the end of the match, there has to be someone to blame,
Yeah.
and we can't do so.
No, it's like that's absolutely right. I know we're laughing about that a little bit, but yeah, like it comes back to the line of communication. The coach is kind of the person that's relaying all the information back and then restoring the strategy. Putting that on a student can be difficult at times. You find that gem sometimes where the student can handle it and they do a really good job of it. For us, we've always found that it works better to just have an
So you said you guys like to teach driving kind of in these stages of like starting to drive training and this and this. How do you work that in when you're trying to do tryouts for drive, where you want to be testing more than just how they're moving the robot?
To be honest, that's all we test.
Okay.
For drive, we only test how they move because we find that any other component of it, we would probably be able to figure out in practice if they're good at something that we can teach them to do it first. So, like on Thursday, I ran tryouts we had full robots, but we didn't run it with any pickup or anything. It was just driving to keep it consistent and just get the like baseline. You don't want to make a decision just because the kid's really good at Fortnite that they're going to be really good at this thing, and that's the reason they get driver. That's what the majority of the kids we find.
Yeah.
Like that's not, you don't want to make that a decision because they're like good at gaming, but they can be good at driver. It's just trying to get a baseline idea, like if they have like the activities.
How do you decide on operator?
Yeah, so I do rules quiz to start. I mean, it's not about getting it completely right. Obviously, it helps. It's about like seeing if they put in the effort to actually take the time to learn it. And then the second one is I will review a video with them, and I'll pause it throughout the match and ask them like which game pieces to pick up, what should you do next. This year was a lot about switching to amping and speaker. And trying to figure out like what the other team is doing, what the other teammates are doing. So I kind of walked them through it. I just want to see what their thought process is. It's not really about getting it right. We had they don't actually know this yet, but we had a kid basically who like flubbed the quiz completely, but she was really, really good at the operator level. So it becomes really hard to understand like, do you want to actually put this person in the role? I'd probably lean on not doing it if we have somebody that was maybe a little worse at the operator quiz, but got the test right.
For me, it was pretty much driver knows what the driver should automatically know what routes they're taking. So when if something's switching up, then the operator does something else.
I think robots are too fast now to even like do it properly. Like 2017, we were definitely calling routes more often, but yeah, no shots.
How do you guys feel with having grade 9s lead drivers, and how do you get them up to speed enough to even like be able to drive the robot in time for trials?
Yeah, I mean, Dave once had a grade 7 driver, so it's definitely possible. I would say. I don't even know if I would do that necessarily. Grade 9s, it's so 1285, 1241, 1285 years. You do have that junior team to kind of do that, but if the kid's involved, I don't see why not. Like it seems like they're really involved with the program. They're willing to put in the time. They're just maybe not a leader just yet. I think it's still worth considering.
For example, the 1241 driver 2015 to 2017, 2014 to 2016, he was in grade 10 when we picked him as driver, and then he was driver for 3 years. After that, same thing with the next driver. He'd been in 1285 for grade 9, and then he was driver for 3 years. The current driver that's going on to 1241 was 1285 driver from last year. So for us, we actually prefer if they're a younger student because then we get that training out for the next 3 years.
So often when you start with drivers, if you do try every year and then like if they're like 6 months better, then you switch them out. What?
So it depends on the year. We sometimes do tryouts every year for driver. So this year, specifically because we had the 1285 driver, we thought it would be disingenuous to be honest, because the kid is still very involved to do 1241 tryouts. So we skipped the driver one completely because we knew that they were going to move on either way. So I would say we assess every year whether it makes sense to do it or not. If you have an experienced driver that is still very committed to the team, then there's no real reason why they shouldn't be driving.
Yeah, typically what we've done is if there's a driver that's been driving for 2 years and they're about to go into their grade 12 year, we ask the students if anybody feels like they want a Shahroze driver tryout, we're willing to post a driver tryout. It'll just be a little bit difficult because they have been driving for 2 years and they've done an excellent job with it. But yeah, we always open it up if needed.
So are you thoughts on training up the senior driver, let's say a driver, or they kind of go out to the operators that potentially be the driver?
I personally think it takes different skills. So I wouldn't necessarily, if I had a kid that was really good at potentially being a driver, I would actually probably opt them to become a player over tool op. I prefer the tool op to be more experienced. probably more than the driver, if anything. But I think it depends on how you know. But for the most part, I would not do that.
Like your operators are second coach, so for instance, we found our operators are usually very well in football.
If anything, the opposite happens. It's like
Yeah.
a grade 12 operator and then a grade 10 driver. All right. So yeah, I think we're just above time. So thanks for staying the extra 4 minutes. Contact information. We have both our emails there. I even put my Instagram handle there if you wanted to get in contact with us. But, but yeah, thank you for coming. And yeah, have a good one.
I agree.